So MMC is really, if we talk about it as a kit of parts, it's lots of various components that are put together in various different ways. Between those elements, you have an interface and you have a tolerance. So that tolerance needs to be considered at the early stages of the design. If you're combining a traditionally constructed element with an off-site manufactured element, they will have two very different tolerances, and both need to be considered equally.
Interfaces are when the different building elements come together, or the distant systems. The building elements are still the same building elements that have been there for years. There's over 60 different building elements and different types. They're fairly well defined. They're used in the building information models at the moment. But where the difficulty is that engagement and communication. Because you're going manufacturing off-site and you have on-site traditional construction running in parallel, you've got to understand the interfaces. So we need the right tools. We need everyone looking at the 3D model. We need to make sure that everyone is plugging into that. Because if you get this wrong, then what will happen is you will have breakdowns at the interfaces between the civil structural elements or the mechanical, electrical and piping elements. So to get every component right, you've got to work together as a team and collaborate. So that's what we mean by the interfaces. It's getting those points of connections. It's getting those where you're assembling the off-site elements with the on-site elements and making sure that those tolerances and everything is set out and coordinated correctly. So therefore it becomes a seamless process that when these modules or 2D panelized systems arrive, that they drop into position and everything is fully coordinated and interfaced. And that's what we mean by interfacing.
Interface management on 3D volumetric is absolutely vital, in particular for the pharma or data center markets, where a digital twin is developed early stage on the project, where all the relevant stakeholders, designers and trade partners are working on a shared federated 3D model. The design is developed and coordinated in a live scenario with all entities working on this one digital model. Once all of those issues are resolved, it's much easier for manufacturing to start and finish without any stoppages. Hence we get efficiencies, we get higher quality, and we get lower safety issues. The interfaces and the coordination on the residential sector are mainly focused around the M&E intersections to make sure that everything fits in, everything can be pre-assembled. So by designing everything at 3D, early stage, it allows us to focus on pre-assembly of pipe headers, of roof sections, of floor sections and of walls. And we can allow for all the M&E services within that wall to be pre-assembled. We then end up with a kit of parts that we assemble here in the factory, which makes it much more productive, much more efficient, much safer and much higher quality.
So you've got to remember, when these modules are made standalone, they also interface when they're all brought together. So they may interact differently, or they may start to move or adjust in accordance with the environment they're set into. So again, you've environmental considerations, you've local site considerations. There's been stories around different moisture contents, so bringing modulars across different aspects. In Europe, for example, in Austria, they have different temperatures. So in the cold winter, their frost is a drier frost, whereas more on the Atlantic border, if you look at Scotland, Wales, Ireland, we're more of a damper environment. So when things freeze, they might thaw at a slower rate, and then you end up with moisture content issues behind products. So these are the type of things. So there's a science behind this, there's a material technology. So there's understanding the interactions and the interfaces of these materials and in the environment that they're going to be subject to. So that might be an example of things you need to be aware of and cognizant of.